So I'm going to recommend three movies. This is a taisho trilogy by seijun Suzuki. Nothing on the back really. No images. So you're not actually going to be able to see from this video anything about what these movies are like, unfortunately. Really lush period pieces set in the taisho era, which is the era in Japan that's sort of early 20th century. So I think it ends in like 1920 and it sort of begins, I don't know, 1905 or something. It's a period. If you know anything about Japanese history, this is the period after the Meiji Revolution, which is sort of the reaction to the opening up of trade between Japan and the rest of the world, where they had intentionally closed trade, except for very specific things, and a very, like, you'd have to be Dutch and you'd have to go to an island that was all Dutch people except for a couple Japanese traders, and you couldn't leave the island, and then the Japanese traders could leave, but they'd be searched, and it was all a whole thing. That ended when Commodore Perry of the U.S. Army or Navy or something came with a giant big gunship and said, Japan, you're going to trade with us or else. And so they did. But that caused them to have a political revolution and a very rapid period of modernization, because they're essentially feudal. And then they're essentially feudal at the beginning of the Meiji era, and then by the end of the Meiji era, and I should say the eras in Japan are the reign of an emperor. So this is like 50 years, right? At the end of the Meiji era, they were industrial. And the Taisho era is this period in between the Meiji and the Showa. And the Showa is sort of, the Showa encompasses the entirety of like Imperial Japan, where they were highly nationalistic. So the Taisho period is basically when Japan was at its most cosmopolitan, but at the same time there are all these elements of feudal Japan that are still present. It's a very interesting period. The Taisho trilogy is three kind of experimental surrealist period pieces. The first one is Zigure Zige Unterweisen, which is not a Japanese word, as you can tell. It's very similar to, if you've ever seen Jigoku. It's sort of like this guy is having sort of problems with his friend, who's sort of a edgelord, and he's like a sort of mousy academic, and then you slowly, over the course of the film, realize, oh, like, it's possible that all of these people are dead and they're in hell, and that kind of explains some of the things that are going on. Highly recommend that. That's my favorite of the trio. Kageroza is the second movie. It's very similar, but it centers around a blonde, blue-eyed geisha. In other words, a Westerner who had come to Japan and kind of like got, I don't know, bought, or like there's a kind of proprietary sense of ownership that this particularly rich guy has over her. And then there's also like this other stream involving like a theatrical troupe, and these are very difficult movies to explain. The third one actually a biopic of it's called Yumeji. It's a biopic of the artist named Yumeji, who is kind of one of the most recognizable Japanese artists of the Taisho period, visual artists, I should say. That's my least favorite, but also I feel like if I knew more about Yumeji and his cultural impact, I'd like it a lot more. So these are movies that, if you don't know anything about Japanese history, are like just hammering you with weird shit. But if you do know about Japanese history, they're really interesting. And the more you know about Japanese history, the more you're going to get out of them. Give them a try. Seijun Suzuki is an excellent director. The feel of these movies when you're watching them, it's like you're watching Merchant Ivory productions on like edibles, where it's like, oh yeah, this is a period piece. Oh, it's really well produced, but then things don't quite add up. Things seem a little bit weird, and it builds.